Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. Thanks for having me here today, and thanks for the introduction, Sonia. As Sonia says, I'm John Vines. I'm a professor at Northumbria University School of Design, where I work in the Co-Create research group. In this talk today, I'm going to try and do some broad scene setting more than anything else. I'm going to give an overview of potential opportunities digital technologies may present us in relation to addressing issues of loneliness. I'm not intending this to be a research talk in the normal sense, so I'm not going to report on specific studies that we've conducted or their findings. And I'm certainly not going to do something which is fully comprehensive. But I hope it highlights some of the possibilities technology presents us at the intersection of loneliness, social isolation, and mental health. And maybe that it might stimulate some ideas, reflections, and other musings that might be relevant as we go forward into the network's next stage. And I need to press that button. There we go. So first of all, I think it's hard to talk about the topic of digital technologies and loneliness without addressing social media. Now, the literature around social media sites and loneliness is actually quite polarized. There are those that argue that social media has the potential to enable people experiencing loneliness to grow their social connections. Then there are those that argue that such platforms can exacerbate feelings of being alone or being isolated, and it displaces the potential to form meaningful offline relationships. But there are now studies emerging that are cutting through some of this. And in short, these studies say that social media use can be both positive and negative in terms of its influences on someone's mental health and well-being. And it very much depends on how it is used and what people's expectations are around its use. For instance, Bakalu and colleagues in this recent paper here highlighted how everyday routine use of social media to maintain connectivity with friends, family, colleagues can actually enhance well-being. But when it becomes used in ways that are more emotionally invested in, then its use can also be associated with reduced social well-being and negative mental health. And in a similar sense, Noland and colleagues in this review paper looked at the bi-directional relationships between loneliness and social media use. And their subsequent model makes a compelling case that social media use can be an effective means to address feelings of isolation when used purposefully to forge new relationships or to deepen existing ones. But if an individual is already feeling some severe forms of loneliness, there is an increased likelihood that they will practice behaviours online that further displace other relationships and communications and potentially isolate themselves further. But it's also really important to look beyond the dominant social media platforms and studies that focus on these. For instance, there is a long-standing area of research on online health communities and the potential for online fora to connect people together around issues that concern them. These typically occur in dedicated social platforms where people can post questions, seek help, and provide support to others. For example, Big White Wall is a platform that we're doing some work with at the moment at Northumbria, which allows users to anonymously post questions and thoughts in relation to their mental health, which are then responded to by people with lived experience and mental health professionals. And one of the key drivers for people coming to platforms like this is a sense of not having anyone to turn to talk about their problems they're experiencing, and a fear of opening up in more public social channels. But it's not just online fora that can connect people in new ways, but platforms and apps can also facilitate and broker connections that happen through other channels or might happen offline. So really quite interesting example and very timely one is this service called Quarantine Chat, which once you've signed up to it, it randomly connects you to another person to have a surprise and serendipitous conversation with over the phone. And there's also apps out there that set out to matchmake and connect people who may be in the same town, city, or neighborhood. So meetup.com helps people find events and meetups around specific interests in their local area. Then, of course, there's dating platforms, like Tinder. But the example that I have on the screen here is called Peanut, which matches together mums living in the same area together based on their interests and circumstances. And all these types of technologies in different ways have potential to address issues of loneliness and social isolation, but they've received relatively little attention in terms of the impacts they might have on this and people's mental health. Sometimes, though, it's not just about connecting to other people through technology, but instead it's using technologies to support action to help those who might be isolated within communities. And that seems to have been something especially important over the last couple of months whilst we've been experiencing the lockdown. So a couple of months ago, we started to see some situations where a small number of households across the country started putting postcards through people's letterboxes, people living on their same street, in a way to establish protocols for looking out for each other. So people filled out information on cards like these on the screen here, sharing their telephone numbers and noting if the household was shielding or isolating. And then social network platforms have been very important in widening the awareness of what's now become known as viral kindness, and has helped the uptake of these practices around different parts of the UK, as people started to share templates for these postcards that can be produced in people's own homes, alongside tips and advice for streets to self-organise in ways to support people that might be at risk in their local area. And instant messaging platforms have also been really critical to coordinating these endeavours, with WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups being established where households collaboratively keep a watch on others in their street, reporting to each other when certain residents may need more support, or raising concerns if a neighbour has not been heard from or seen for a day or two. And there's also been a resulting growth in popularity of community social networking sites like Nextdoor. If you don't know what Nextdoor is, it's a type of social networking platform for people living on the same street or neighbourhood. And it's existed for around about a decade, but it's waned in popularity quite a bit over time, but has now taken on quite a renewed purpose, with features like help maps where users can make requests for help from neighbours, or make requests on behalf of other local residents who might not have access to the internet. And again, although our understanding of these various different platforms is quite well developed, we don't really understand how they get adopted by communities to form community action, particularly in the context of isolation, and how it might address particular individuals living in communities that might be most at risk. And finally, digital technologies present all manner of other opportunities for us to develop sophisticated substitutes for situations where people experiencing loneliness are unable to socialise or form bonds and connections with other people. So, for example, in the field of robotics, a long-standing area of applied research has been around this idea of social robots, autonomous robots that can interact with people and help with everyday activities. And supporting people experiencing social isolation has been one of the long imagined use cases of these technologies. And now they actually seem to be getting a bit closer to reality. And this quite sweet looking example on the screen here is called Lovot, which, I quote, is a robot whose purpose is to make you happy. And in a similar vein, there is also a rapidly developing field around conversational systems underpinned by artificial intelligence. For instance, Replica is an app that allows you to create a virtual companion, which gets to know you via a text-based chat system, asking about your day. That's fine, Sonia. Asking about your day, checking in on you, and altering its tone and approach to messages as it learns more about you over time. And this very final example is from a company called Rendeavor, which has developed a range of different virtual reality applications to support elders who are physically unable to leave their homes. They've created environments that allow them to experience outdoor spaces through a headset, or allow them to revisit places of significance to them during their lives. And I left these ones to the end because it's possibly these examples where there's the greatest potential for technological innovation. But it's also possibly the area that causes the most uneasiness. And perhaps this is because these tease at some anxieties we might have around the importance of human relationships over all else, and that these can't really be replaced by technologies. but also it might be that some of these examples might be a little bit too technology-led and not take into account the human need. And I guess I'll end my talk there. It was a bit of a flash pan overview. And thank you for listening. And yeah, happy to take any questions at all.